Hello everyone, Shroomraver here, and today I am really excited to be bringing you my draft kind of analysis and breakdown for Parasect Germain in the PPL Season 2. Yes everyone, it is back. It is very exciting. The draft finished very much earlier today. It's 3 PM, I'm sitting in my pyjamas, got a nice glass of chocolate milk, because I'm a grown ass man, I do what I want. Anyway, the draft, it's done. So here we go. Now, before we kick off, a little look back to last season, the draft and how things went. Last season we came in 4th, which is good, very creditable. It's a nice position, top half of the table. But it's not good enough. This season we're looking to finish higher. A few people have left, a few new people have joined, a lot of new threats to deal with. So, the draft. I didn't really have a plan going into it, much like last season. Last season I focused on getting in ridiculous amounts of bulk, without focusing too much on cores, and that very quickly became apparent that it was not necessarily the best way to go. Whilst I had things that could take hits very well, my core work wasn't very good. I didn't have the greatest of defensive synergy. So I wanted to focus a little bit more on that this season. I had a few plans, not many, and certainly nothing concrete. So then it came down to the picking of the orders of who would pick first and whatever. And I got first pick. Now this is both a blessing and a curse. Whilst focusing on the positives, it gives me wheel pick and of course the pick of the bunch for first selection. It does mean that I have to wait 2 entire rounds until it comes back to me. So the opportunity to get sniped was real, and a lot of people did in this draft. But again, focusing on the positives, I had first pick, so what I was able to do was bring back a sort of concept that I've been thinking of very early if I got an ideal first pick. And I wanted to get Firewater Grass as soon as possible, and I had a plan for what I wanted. So, without further ado, let's get into the first pick. As I said, I had first option. I had first choice, I could choose whoever I wanted. So I had no reason not to draft Victini. Victini was my first pick. Arguably, as we all know, one of the best, if not the full best Pokemon in the format. Victini is ridiculously powerful. It can run a numerous amount of sets. You don't argue with the V-Create, especially with base 100 stats across the board. V-Create is very nice clickbait. You can just click it and things will take damage. You always have to prepare for Victini if you're going up against it. You can't not. It's too much of a threat to ignore. I could bring it every week and it would still do damage pretty much every time. Really happy to grab Victini. I couldn't not take the opportunity to use it. It's just so good, and it's going to be putting in a lot of work for me, I'm pretty sure. Kind of the de facto captain of the team, I think we would say. Not really an inordinate much amount to say about it, more than that, it's Victini, it does what it does. And I was really happy to be able to get it. I know a lot of people will have wanted it. It always goes very early, and now it's mine. Nice and Victini. It's going to be putting in a huge amount of work. People are scared of it, and rightly so. It can run all manner of sets, as I've said, and don't think I won't be using gimmicks with it, because I will. I'm sure I will. At least one week there will probably be a gimmicky set. People have got to look out for it, It's a huge threat. So, knowing that I wanted Victini as part of that Firewater Grass core, I then had to wait for it to come all the way back, the draft that is, to me, hoping that I wouldn't get my next 2 selections sniped off me. And, thankfully, I did not. So when it came back to me, I had the wheel pick, and I could get my 2 next mons that I wanted. And the first of those, my second selection, is going to be Polion. Now, at this stage, there are a lot of bulky water types I could have picked, and many people would be saying, quite rightly, Polion is not the best bulky water type. And you'd be right to say that, it certainly is not. But it was what I needed, I'm well aware of the drawbacks, the limitations of Polion. As far as a mon generally used in a defensive role is concerned, it doesn't actually have the best of defensive stats. but it's got the typing I needed. It was the steel type that I wanted on my team, and its lack of reliable recovery is going to be kind of mitigated by mons I selected later. And Polion is nice to take on a lot of hits, like those nasty flying type hits that are going around. Bird spam is very prevalent, and Polion can eat those up. And yeah, it's got hazard options, it's a defogger, a very reliable one at that. And it can run offensive if I particularly need it to. It's got a very nice ability in Define if for some reason I want to go physical, which I can do, and I might do, you never know. Who can say in this day and age. But yeah, Empoleon is going to be huge for me. I'm really excited to use it. I know Jack used it last season to some effect. It was able to do some things. It wasn't necessarily his most successful mon, but I think here it's going to be putting in a lot of work, especially when it is paired with my third selection. The sort of plan I went with Victini and Empoleon was that I knew I wanted a mon that could synergize very well defensively and have those reliable recovery options as well. So with that in mind, my third selection, perhaps a little bit earlier on than people might expect it to go, was Chestnut. Yeah, I selected Chestnut, nice grass and fighting. This was kind of a plan I had when I was sort of considering Victini on the edges of my mind. Grass and fighting synergizes very well indeed with Victini. Victini being weak to the likes of ground and rock and water, dark, and Chestnut takes those hits and eats them up. It's very happy to do that. Synergizes very well, has all of those defensive options with recovery, so many different types of recovery, both offensive, passive and defensive options. All the grass type recovery options, Leech Seed, Giga Drain, Drain Punch. I don't know why I'd run Giga Drain, it's not a special attacker. But it has all of those, and those three together, Victini, Empoleon, Chestnut, between the three of them, they resist 17 of the 18 types in the game, which is a fantastic thing to have in a core of 3. That is a very nice Firewater Grass core that I'm going to be very comfortable using, switching into a lot of different options. Chestnut can run offensive as well. It has the ever-present Belly Drum, which is a very, very scary thing to face down. There's not a lot of things that want to take those hits. Last season, I realised I had a horrific weakness to Quake Edge, that very nice combination of ground and rock. Chestnut is one of the few mons that resist both of those. Grass Fighting is the typing that does that, and Chestnut is probably the best defensive one to go with. So I'm very happy to have grabbed Chestnut fairly early on. And as I say, that is a Firewater Grass core that is going to put in a lot of work defensively. Taking hits, all of them are very bulky naturally, and whilst they may not be the best bulk-wise in their category, in their sort of typing, they gel well together, I think, and that's going to be something I'm very comfortable using. So, I then had to wait once again, the massive turn of everyone picking, lots of threats were going, things like Mamoswine went, Milotic went, Talonflame, Cobalion, things like Dragonite were gone, Entei went in round 4, Feraligatr is a huge threat, Electros went just before it came back to me, and Electros was something I was thinking about, but obviously I didn't get the chance to get it. Now, my next 2 picks. As I said, the 3 I'd already selected resist 17 of the 18 types, the other one being Ghost. So what I wanted was something that could resist Ghost ideally. That would give me full defensive coverage. I also kind of wanted some kind of Cleric Wish Passer. Last season I didn't have one, and it was a weakness of mine. I didn't have any potential passing of recovery, I didn't have a Cleric. So, who do I select that can pass wishes, is a Cleric, and can resist Ghost? And to boot, I kind of wanted to go back to the ideals of last season when I just got ridiculous bulk. So, those 4 things: resist Ghost, ridiculous bulk, Wish Pass, Cleric. 4th selection for me is going to be Umbreon. Umbreon is fairly gross. It's monumentally defensive, very hard to break down. It really invites powerful fighting and bug type attacks, but I have things for them, I think. Fighting is maybe something that I didn't have a resistance for too much, only really Victini from what I'd selected already. But Umbreon is there as team support, and it does that role very well. A lot of these mons are sort of in, if we're looking at Smogon tiers, they're in UU. Now obviously we're not basing our pricings on tiers anymore, we edited those in the off season to sort of make things more realistically priced. So it wasn't based on tiers. However, a lot of those things, as far as tiers go, they're UU. Last season, I completely ignored UU. I'm not making that mistake again. There's some great stuff in there, and I've got a lot of it on my team. Umbreon is one of those mons. It's not there to hit hard, it's there to tank hits and support the rest of my team, and I think it can do that job very well indeed. So, we come to my 5th round pick, and this was kind of the final one in the initial stages of this draft. The draft was planned, well, to the extent that it was planned, which wasn't much, in 3 distinct stages. There was the first 5, there was the next 3, and then there was the summing up. So for my final selection of this particular part of the draft, round 5, there was a few roles I wanted to fill. I wanted another fighting resist, ideally an immunity. I wanted something else to take ground attacks because I had a bit of a weakness going on. So I wanted resistance to fighting and ground. I wanted something that was specially bulky. I wanted another Will-O-Wisper. And I wanted a fast Taunter. And there is a mon that fulfills all those roles. In fact, there are 2, I think. There is Gengar. But Gengar is expensive. It's 15 million in our pricing. There's a mon for less than half of that, which I decided to take, and that is my 5th round pick, Mismagius. Another mon that I haven't used a lot, and that's a running theme with this draft. I'm using mons that I haven't used all that much, because where else are you going to get the chance to use them, you know? Why not give them a go in this kind of format? Mismagius is actually going to be, it was fairly popular as far as mons being selected were concerned. People were looking at Mismagius, so I grabbed it round 5. Ghost is a very nice typing. It's only resisted by Dark and only not affecting Normal, I think, is what we're going with there. Mismagius is powerful. Those last 3 stats, special attack, special defense and speed, I think they're all 105. Obviously it's not the most physically defensive, but I have mons to fulfill that role. Mismagius can do a lot of tricksy things, it can do a lot of powerful things. It's got a very potent nasty plot set. So it can set up sweep, it can do tricksy shenanigans with all those ghost type moves that people need to play around. It's one of those mons that you need to be careful with. It's got to be scouted out first, and you know, in doing so it can set up. So it can be very dangerous if used in the right way. And it has those options I explored before, Taunt, Will-O-Wisp. It's got those fast options with status and stuff like that. Really happy to have Mismagius on the team, and I think it's going to do fairly well for me. So, those are my first 5 selections, and as far as this plan went, none of them were snipes, you know. There was nothing I wanted more than those 5. So I was really comfortable with the selections I made. So once again, I then waited 2 rounds for it to get back to me, and in those kind of stages I was looking at what my team was going to struggle with. And one of those things is bird spam. Bird spam is a problem with Seen Talonflame already drafted. Things like Zapdos were gone, Tornadus T was also gone. So flying spam was going to be a bit of an issue, so I wanted some natural resistances going on, especially given that I had Chestnut, one of my very few, I think it's one of only 2 mons in my entire draft that has a dual weakness. And that's going to invite the bird spam, especially given that up until then I only had 1 natural resistance in the form of Polion. So I wanted some mons that could naturally resist flying type moves. There were also a number of other things I needed. I needed the fast Volt Switcher, which is just a staple of the team. I wanted a little more priority, and I also kind of wanted a dragon. I didn't get a reliable dragon. The last time around I only had Noivern for 1 game and then I instantly dropped it, or rather I traded it, I should say. So, at this point I had spent 53 million, I think. But I still had the option to go big on pricing again. So I looked to some of the options that I just explained. Some form of priority, and faster Volt Switch. So for my 6th pick, I went with Thundurus Incarnate. Very powerful. I've been using Thundurus Incarnate a lot in VGC, as have many. It's very good in that format. So I've become a little bit more familiar with the kind of things you can do there. Obviously those are not going to be too transferable to singles, but it means I'm more comfortable using it as a mon. It has 2 very nice abilities, Prankster and Defiant, really good stuff. It's the fast Volt Switcher that is so important and prevalent in the format, And it does have, as I say, those status priorities. Prankster, very nice indeed. Prankster T-Wave, Prankster Tailwind, they could be very, very vital, key aspects of a game. They can win or lose things for you, whether or not you have them. It's also just a very powerful attacker. Both of its attack stats, I believe, are above 115. I could be wrong, but they're definitely both above 100. So I can run mixed if I particularly need to. If I don't want to risk the electric immunity, I can be running U-turn. Thundurus Incarnate is another one of those things like Miss Magus, which can be powerful, can be tricksy, can set up, you know. So Thundurus Incarnate is 6th pick. And yeah, as I say, it's a natural resistance to flying, albeit not the best one. Its defensive stats are not exactly top dollar, but it will do, you know. In a pinch, it can do. It has been used defensively, we've seen it before, so that's an option I can explore as well. So yeah, Thundurus is my 6th pick, and my draft was starting to look very powerful indeed, actually, with those 6 already selected. People were getting worried about it, and rightly so. So then it comes to my 7th pick, and I started to realise a few things. The second core that people like to have is Fairy Dragon Steel. I had one of those. I did not have a dragon, I did not have a fairy. And the good fairies were gone at this point. So I kind of was a bit worried about that. I was like, there aren't good fairies left. There are only a handful in their entirety left. So I thought, okay, focus on the dragon bit. Because as I said last time, I didn't have a reliable dragon. And there was a Mon there, who was a dragon type, very powerful, potential setup, can go defensive, and also is another natural resistance to flying typing. And that is going to be Tyrantrum. I grabbed Tyrantrum, who is a powerful, powerful threat. We've seen Bice use it in the TBU, used it very effectively in a defensive role, and has run Scarfed, and obviously it has Dragon Dance set up. It has one of those powerful, powerful spammable moves in the form of Head Smash, which can put the hurt on a lot of people. The combination of that plus Victini's V-Create, it's deadly. It really is. So Tyrantrum is going to be looking good. It's another option for Stealth Rocks. I have a couple of those. I have good options for Hazards on this team. Again, not something I had last time. I only had 2 Stealth Rockers last time. One of them was Piloswine, which isn't great. So I've gone with Tyrantrum, forming the second part of that Fairy Dragon Steel core, along with Polion. Yeah, it's going to be good. Again, not a mon I've used an enormous amount, but it's a massive threat. Tyrantrum is powerful. There's not really all that much else to be said about it. You let a Tyrantrum set up, it's going to be doing nasty damage. It's not the most powerful speed-wise. I think it's taps out base 75 speed? Correct me if I'm wrong on that, I could be wrong. I don't have stats up next to me. I might show them on screen. You never know, I haven't planned that yet. But yeah, Tyrantrum, if you let it set up, it's going to be putting the hurt on a lot of mons. People are worried about it. As I've said with a lot of the drafts that I've got, people are worried about Tyrantrum. And they should be, because it's deadly. So, at this point, I think we wound down for the day. The draft happened over a course of 3 days, with people being in various different time zones. But I was very happy with what I had. And, you know, looking at my team at this point, I was sort of singling out a few things that I still needed. I really wanted a fairy. I really wanted a spinner. I really wanted an electric immunity. These things are all very important. And as the draft was winding back to me, I was worried that my next one was going to be sniped. I had 2 mons in mind that I wanted at this stage, and those were Sandslash and Wheezing. And as it got back to me, to my round 8 pick, Sandslash was not taken. So I went with Sandslash. Sandslash is, you know, it's not the greatest mon, we all know this. It has options, it's the spinner and the electric immunity that I wanted, lacking on the special defense side a lot. But, you know, I have defensive options with the rest of my team that I'm very comfortable with. Sandslash can fit in very nicely. Spinner, Stealth Rocker, nice defensive stat, can run offensive if it needs to. It's got the knockoff that is so important. It's one of several knockoff users that I have, and it's probably one of the better ones going at this stage in the draft. Certainly it was. If, God forbid, I want to run Sand Rush, you never know. Weirder things have happened. You know, Sand Rush is what's made a lot of mons very, very good in Sand. Stuff like Stoutland, stuff like Excadrill. There's a reason Excadrill went to Ubers. Obviously, Sandslash is kind of a poor man's Excadrill, but, you know, it gets the job done. And I couldn't afford Excadrill, so had to go with Sandslash. Yeah, Sandslash is going to be nice for me. It's what I needed at the time. It can't do everything, obviously, but as I say, it should go well with the rest of the team. I'm really hoping so anyway. Now, we move on to the round 9 pick, and as I said, I wanted Weezing, but Weezing, much like last season, went before I could get it in round 8. So I kind of had to look elsewhere, and I was struggling a little bit because there are a few threats that my team still didn't deal with. Now, I'm not going to go into what those are, but if you know what you're doing, you can work it out. So I needed something ideally physically bulky that could take on some threats that my team didn't deal with too well. I was chatting to a few people, and an option came up that I hadn't really thought about. And I ran some calcs, and it looks very promising. And it's going to be a little bit of a contentious option, but at round 9 I drafted Furfrou. Furfrou has the potential to be a very, very potent physical tank. It's got Fur Coat as its ability, and Cotton Guard as a move, which can buff that not stellar physical defense to make it something very, very powerful defensively. It's got nice natural special bulk, and it's faster than you might think. Sitting at base 102, that's outspeeding all of those base 100 across the board pixie things. Like Victini, which I have, Shaman, Manaphy, you know, they're all getting outsped by Furfrou. But if I decide not to invest in speed, you're looking at a slow U-turner, which is very nice. It's got Sucker Punch, which is fantastic. Nice priority once again. It's also got a very underrated move in Baby Doll Eyes, which is priority attack lowering. So all of these options to really buff its physical defense and make it an absolute tank to allow it to sort of pass around status. It doesn't have reliable recovery, but I do have a Wish Passer already, which I can use to great effect. With the likes of Polion and Furfrou, defensive ones that don't have great recovery options, I have support for them. Furfrou could be something of a little hidden gem, a little bit of an ace in the hole. There are threats to my team and lots of others that Furfrou actually deals with very well indeed. Furfrou, incidentally, was the first mon on X and Y that I EV trained and bred, and I've used it a few times, and it's not bad, you know. I like Furfrou. Furfrou's pretty good. As I said, it's a little bit of a contentious one because, you know, at the end of the day, it's a Furfrou, but this is not the first time it's been drafted, you know. Anima drafted Furfrou in the TBU. She never used it, but at the time of recording, she's at the top of the table by a fair amount. Coincidence? I think not. Obviously it is. But, you know, Furfrou is an option that I will have to be exploring. It's not something I'm going to be bringing every week, but when I do, there'll be a purpose to it. And best believe it's going to be putting in the finest of work. So, at this point the draft is winding down. Round 9 saw a lot of people get to the end of their draft, run out of money, and just sit with a team of 9. Some people had enough for one left. At this stage, I had 17 million left. I like doing this. I like drafting low tier stuff, low price stuff, I should say, and then sort of sitting there with a lot of money for my last couple of selections. I did it last season, it didn't work out because I hit buy sharp, didn't use it in 4 games, and then probably dropped it. So this time, I looked to mons that I didn't have. I looked to options that I wanted. And looking at my team, something I wanted was another pacey physical attacker, ideally with initiative gaining. And I also kind of wanted bug offense, which is something I didn't have. And a mon that jumped out at me was my 10th round pick, Scyther. I believe this was the second potential Eviolite user, third actually. I'm just seeing Rhydon was drafted earlier on. So I think this might be the third around there Eviolite user to be drafted. Not a lot of Eviolite went this season. A lot did last time, not so much this time. But Scyther stands out as an Eviolite user. Certainly, especially in the fact that it doesn't need to use Eviolite. You know, it's primarily an offensive mon. You see it choiced very often. And, you know, it was a standalone mon until it got its evolution in the form of Sizzle. So it's got very good stats of its own back, you know. It's not sitting in the NFE tier. If we're looking at tiers, I think it's NU. But obviously, we're not basing this on tiers anymore. That's just an example to show you what Scyther can do. It's got base 105 attack, base 105 speed, I think. Maybe one of them's base 110, I don't know. As I say, I don't have the stats up, I don't know off the top of my head. But Scyther is powerful, it's fast. With Eviolite, it can be bulky. It doesn't have to, it can run choiced, it can run setup, it can baton pass, which is a very nice thing indeed. It has, as I say, initiative in U-turn, which is stab, very nice. It has knockoff, which is really important. Everyone loves a good bit of knockoff, you know what I mean? Scyther is what I needed. And obviously, it's dual weak to rocks, it's dual weak to rock type attacks. It's got its weaknesses, it's got its limitations, I know this. But I'm okay with it. As I say, it's one of only 2 mons on my team that has a dual weakness. So it can do a lot of things. It can threaten a lot of mons. There are a lot of bulky psychic types that people are really getting into at the moment. Because they wall things like Mega-Audino, which is a threat that people need to deal with. So to have something that can potentially take on those bulky psychic types is going to be very, very nice. Scyther can really put the hurt on a lot of mons. Things like Mew, things like Mushana got drafted pretty early. Yeah, Scyther's going to be putting in a decent shift for me, I think. Again, probably not one of those mons that I'm going to bring every week, but when I do, it's there, once again, for a purpose, and it's going to get that done. I absolutely believe in it. So, we come to round 11, the final pick. At this point, I had 13 million left, which is enough to get some power, you know. A lot of people were out of money way before this point. So, something I've been saying a lot throughout this little draft thing is that I was missing a fairy. Fairy's very nice. It stops dragon spam. At this point, I only had 1 resistance to dragon, and a lot of dragons were drafted. Things like Hydreigon was gone. What's that one? Mence went fairly late on, actually. Dragonite was gone as well. The Latties both went very early. Noivern went in round 7. So a lot of dragons. And I only had 1 resistance. Now, I had been planning this pick since round 5. By that point even, I think everyone had a fairy except Evelyn. And when round 7 came, she picked her Mega. You might be able to see where I'm going with this. My selection for round 11, Mega-Audino. I did it. I went with Mega-Audino. And I'm not even mad. I'm not sorry for it. I'm excited for it. When Eric selected Mega-Audino in the TBU, he was vilified, slated, even by me. I'll admit it. I raised eyebrows. I said, that's a bad selection. Why would you pick Mega-Audino? And then I saw why, because he used it very effectively. And since then, it's been on Showdown a lot. People have been using Mega-Audino. It's very difficult to take down, you know? It's the fairy I needed. It was 10 million. The only other options, I've got them down here, the only other options really that were left were Slurpuff, Carbink, and Mr. Mime. Shout out to Jedi. I didn't want Carbink because it compounded my ground weakness. I didn't want Slurpuff because it's too predictable. It can only really do a couple of things. I didn't want Mr. Mime because it's Mr. Mime. Sorry, Jedi. I'm sorry. So I went with Mega-Audino. It's a very potent defensive setup mon. Once it gets set up, it's so hard to take down. It's my second cleric. It's my second wish passer. It's my second immunity, my second resistance, I should say. It's my first immunity to dragon. It's bulky. It can do offensive things. Eric brought offensive Audino week 1 in the TBU. It put in the finest of work. So yeah, that's why I picked Mega-Audino. People raised eyebrows. People said that's not a good pick. People have said that it's going to show up the poorer players in the league, which is an interesting option to take. But the guy who said it, you know, he's been an analyst for a while. I've got to say, he probably knows what he's talking about. He raised eyebrows over it, many others did. And that's fine, you know. It's certainly a contentious pick. I'll readily admit to that. But it's the fairy I needed. It's my Batman. It's the fairy I needed, you know. And I think it's going to support the team fairly well. It can run either defensive stat. It's going to be able to fill a lot of holes on the team. So, with that, we come to the end of my draft. To run over the team very quickly again, we have, for Parasect Germain, Season 2 of the PPL, Victini, Polion, Chestnut, Umbreon, Mismagius, Thundurus Incarnate, Tyrantrum, Sandslash, Furfrou, Scyther, and Mega-Audino. That's the squad, gang. We're looking to take first this time. As I said, a few people have left, a few new people are in. So, what do you reckon? What do you think of Parasect Germain for Season 2? What are your opinions? Tell me what you like, tell me what you dislike, tell me what you think is going to be putting in the finest of work, and tell me what you think is going to be an absolute flop. Because there's bound to be both. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me. As I say, you know, let me know what you think of this draft. I'm really happy with it. I was sniped once for the entire time. That being, there were a few other things I was considering but weren't part of my plans, so I don't really consider them to be snipes. And given how many people were, I think Raikwin only got 3 of his initial selections. I think Shardy got 2, which I'm so happy about. I shit talk Shardy a lot. I love him. He's fantastic, but I do like seeing him suffer. A lot of people were sniped. I was not one of those people. Very happy about that. But yeah, as I say, that's going to be the team. The games begin, I believe, next weekend. Our first game is up against Slyro and the Pittsburgh Pyro. It's going to be a bit of a grudge match. I won last time because of hacks, so that's going to be a good game. Really looking forward to that. Really looking forward to the season as a whole, and I hope you are too. So, support Parasect Germain, guys. We are going for the top. That is going to be it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and I guess with that, I will see you next time. Laters.